A few shout-outs to some of the groups who are represented here today. Members of the James McGill Circle, our university's most generous benefactors, members of McGill's Board of Governors, volunteers and leaders from the various boards, including the McGill Alumni Association. We also have the leaders of public policy forums across Canada. We also have two former Supreme Court justices. One former Supreme Court justice who's with us, who's also McGill alumni, Maurice Fish. We have Erwin Kotler, who's very generously come today, former minister, even though he's receiving an honorary doctorate from the university over the mountain this afternoon. So thank you very much, Erwin, for being here. Université de Montréal. And I have to say how very, very pleased I am to see so many colleagues from the different departments, schools, and institute, not only in the Faculty of Arts, but across McGill University. And I think this also speaks to the fact that this project, this initiative, the Max Bell School of Public Policy, is something that is anchored in the Faculty of Arts, but is actually a cross-university collaboration. So thank you very much, all of you, for being here. Alors que nous parlons du leadership dans le domaine de politique publique et dans le domaine des affaires universitaires, le moment est particulièrement bien choisi pour vous parler de l'un de mes collègues qui a joué un rôle premier plan dans la création de cette école de politique publique. Il s'agit en fait du professeur Christopher Manfredi, vice-principal exécutif et vice-principal aux études de l'Université McGill. Et avant d'occuper le rôle de vice-principal exécutif et vice-principal aux études, Christopher Manfredi a été doyen de la Faculté des arts de l'université, un poste qu'il a occupé pendant 2 mandats, soit entre 2006 et 2015. En 1988, il a intégré le département de sciences politiques de McGill, qu'il a d'ailleurs dirigé de 2000 à 2006. À l'exception d'une année au cours de laquelle il a pris un congé sabbatique, qui est très, très important et prisé par nous tous comme collègues. Parmi les domaines de recherche qui captent le plus son attention et en fait le nôtre, mentionnons la politique judiciaire, la conception et la théorie constitutionnelle, le droit et la politique, ainsi que la mobilisation juridique. Et l'un de ses principaux intérêts a toujours été, et continue d'être, l'école de politique Max Bell. Sans Christopher Manfredi, sans son collaboration et sans sa vision, nous n'aurons pas été convenus à cette occasion aujourd'hui. Donc, il me fait un grand plaisir de vous présenter le professeur Chris Manfredi.
Merci beaucoup, Antonia. Je suis ravi d'être ici et je te remercie pour cette présentation beaucoup trop généreuse. I want to thank you for that much more gracious presentation than I deserve, and I want to welcome everyone this afternoon. After so many months of planning and hard work on the part of a lot of people, it's rewarding to be here for the launch of McGill's Max Bell School of Public Policy. Et je voudrais féliciter à tous et tous qui ont été impliqués dans la création de l'école de politique publique Max Bell. I want to, he was referred to a little bit earlier, but I do want to mention the key role that my predecessor, Tony Massey, played in the creation of this school, not only with respect to initiating the conversations with the foundation, but also to listening to a rather insistent dean several years ago and funding the feasibility study that allowed us to put together the plan for the school. So I think we owe Tony a lot for getting here today. As Provost of McGill, I'm responsible for overseeing our university's academic programs, and I have a keen appreciation for the policy work that goes on in different faculties and schools at the university. And in fact, one of the key building blocks for the Max Bell School is McGill's existing interdisciplinary knowledge and reputation, which focuses on a wide range of policymaking issues. Interdisciplinarity, in fact, is a key factor for a successful school of public policy. In today's world, healthcare goes hand in hand with economics, environment affects foreign policy, social services are connected to legal issues, medicine is tied to education. Good policy is best served by a cross-functional perspective. Collaboration is the key to building smart and successful 21st century policies. And the policy expertise is certainly here at McGill in different faculties and pockets of research across our campuses, downtown and at the McDonald campus. They include accomplished experts in health and social policy, environmental policy, education policy, governance and public service delivery, a whole range of informed and influential perspectives. And the Max Bell School of Public Policy will be home to these existing collaborations and establish exciting new ones. We will also embrace our cultural milieu and physical location to build relationships with educational, commercial, and policy sectors in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and around the world. And it will be an inclusive entity for all communities. Once the school is up and running, it will become a thriving organism that will develop as other parts of the university naturally gravitate toward it. Though situated in the Faculty of Arts, the school is expressly designed to be a multi-faculty and multidisciplinary school. So I want to extend my congratulations to my colleague, Chris Ragan. With Chris's vision and leadership and a great team working with him, I believe that we have all of the prerequisites to make the Max Bell School of Public Policy a valuable contributor to our society and our world. And now I think it's time for us officially to welcome Chris to the microphone in his new capacity. So ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, please welcome Professor Christopher Ragan, the inaugural director of the Max Bell School of Public Policy.
Thank you very much. I am cognizant of the fact that I am the last thing that stands before you and our keynote speaker, so I am going to try to be brief. But let me just say at the outset that I am delighted to be here. I'm delighted that McGill is has now created a School of Public Policy. I'm delighted to be in that position to join together with my colleagues to build something wonderful. So let me begin by thanking the good people at Max Bell Foundation, thanking Tony Massey for his hard work on this behind the scenes. Thank you to Suzanne and to Chris and to Antonia. I hope that we don't end up thinking it was a collective act of recklessness to appoint me into this position. We will see. One of the missions of the Max Bell School of Public Policy will be to engage with the public and to engage with government in a discussion about public policy. Communication, I have come to learn, is extremely important, especially about complex ideas of public policy. So in the spirit of trying to do a little communication, let me just say very quickly, there will be three messages that I think if you tune into this space over the next few years, there will be three messages that I hope I will be relentless in repeating. The first message is that public policy matters. I think it is a very underappreciated thing. I think many people's eyes glaze over when they hear people talk about public policy, but make no mistake, there are connections between the way we design a tax system, the way we train our nurses and doctors, the way we engage with the rest of the world. Those things matter for our lives. The second message is that good policy doesn't just happen. You will have seen this glossy brochure on your table. Good policy takes hard work, and an important part of what we will do at the School of Public Policy is to incorporate that idea in our research and our teaching. I say that knowing full well that it's very difficult to tell academic researchers what to do, and I don't intend to start. But when we teach public policy, we will certainly be talking about the various kinds of difficulties in designing and implementing and sustaining good policy. And the third message is that McGill is an awesome place to do this. We have great researchers across the faculties that have been thinking about public policy for a long time. We have great connections made with governments around the world, and we have great students. And those three things are a tremendous foundation on which to build a good school of public policy. As Chris discussed in his comments, the policy challenges we face are difficult, and I actually think that they are getting more difficult over time. They are forcing a coming together of economic, political, scientific, social issues. And that requires us, I think, to think differently, a little bit more carefully about the way we teach policy, research policy, and actually design policies. So whether we're talking about global challenges like climate change that are complicated across the board, or very local challenges about urban sprawl and traffic congestion, there are complexities that we need to appreciate and fully face. So being creative and innovative in a policy school, in the design of the school, the design of the curriculum, is a central part of what we will be doing. Professors of practice will play a really important role in the Max Bell School of Public Policy. So much of the teaching will be done by McGill professors, but a big fraction will also be done by people who were in the policy trenches, whether they were in the policy trenches in New Brunswick or Alberta or in various parts of Ottawa or indeed in the rest of the world. People that have real life experience from designing policies that have succeeded, designing policies that have failed, getting those people in front of our students to actually talk about the practice of policy, not just the theory of policy. And that brings me to two other gifts to the school that I'd like to announce. The McConnell Foundation has provided $1 million gift for professors of practice, and an anonymous donor has given a $2 million gift for a professorship in a specific thing, a professorship in program evaluation. Now that's a fairly geeky term, so let me unpack that for you. Program evaluation is the idea, the recognition that our policies may not actually work the way we designed them. So let's actually look at them as they're working in practice and see if they are accomplishing their intended objective and in an effective way and in a low-cost way. Program evaluation is a central part of practical policy making. So thank you to the McConnell Foundation. Where's John? Thank you very much. And thank you to that anonymous, intriguing donor. And I hope that I will stand before you in some venue over the near future to talk about other gifts and possibly intriguing and maybe even anonymous gifts. Final comment before the introduction. This glossy document that I waved about before, and if you don't have one, please pick one up on the way out. It will give you a glimpse of the various things that we are thinking about in terms of the school. It will also show off about 35, which is a small number, of the McGill researchers who are currently doing really good work in public policy. So what that shows is that we are building on our strengths. So take a look and to see those people that are highlighted in that document. So this brings me to the last thing that I wanted to announce, which is an advisory board. I started this position in a formal capacity September 1st, but I started thinking about it back in, I don't know, April. And one of the things that I wanted to be able to announce today was a chairmanship of group chairs of an advisory board. And what I thought was really important for the school was to have a collection of people that would span various spaces. They would span politics and policy and business and East and West and inside Canada and outside Canada. The first person who agreed to be a co-chair on that advisory board is Dominic Barton. Dominic Barton is the Canadian global managing partner of McKinsey & Company. He is not with us today. He is probably getting out of a jet on some airstrip someplace. And today, if today is representative, he will be talking to a business leader and a government leader all before dinner. Look for our launches that we are planning for the UK and for New York City and elsewhere, and I think you will find him on one of those. Michael Sabia is the second person. Michael Sabia, I think, as you know, is the CEO of the Caisse de dépôt et placement du Québec. He is a very interesting creature. He is an interesting creature because he knows the policy world and he knows the world of business, and he knows both very, very well. Some people love what he did at the Department of Finance. He designed what is both the most efficient and the most hated tax in Canadian history, otherwise known as the GST. So economists love him, normal people maybe not so much. But he went on from there to go to CN, to go to Bell, and is now at the Caisse de dépôt. He is not here right now, but he will be here at 2 o'clock to be speaking on the first panel. I think you will be hard-pressed to find somebody who will be more logical, more structured, and more clear in their exposition. So I invite you to check him out on the panel at 2 o'clock. And that brings me to my third co-chair of the advisory board. And this is a person who I did not meet until about an hour and a half ago. But I have known of and admired from afar from a long time, and this is Rona Ambrose. Rona Ambrose has been a minister of several things in the previous government, federal government, and one of the things that I have been told by people that were both in her political office and in her civil service office is that she is an outstanding minister. This is not something you often hear, just so that you know. Even in their more candid moments, people don't often say, my minister is really great. But they do say that about Rona Ambrose. You might have noticed, when she was the interim leader of the Conservative Party. And like, I think, 10 million other Canadians, I said to myself, wow, why couldn't she be the leader of the Conservative Party and not just the interim leader? Well, I think she's still young, and I think it's hard to figure out what will happen in the future. So we never know. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce the Honourable, and you never know, maybe at some point, Right Honourable, Rona Ambrose.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here with all of you, and it's great to join. I know Dominic and Michael aren't here, but I just want to say how excited I am to be one of the other Cherish people. I know they're big brains, and I'm really looking forward to working with them and Chris, and you can see how enthusiastic and passionate Chris is, and I'm very, very excited. He had me at hello, as they say, when we talked on the phone and emailed back and forth about his vision for the School of Public Policy. And I can tell you there are other places to go for people like me, and I was really excited to join Chris at this school. So I want to thank, of course, Antonia and Suzanne and Tom. And in particular, I really want to say a big thank you to the Max Bell Foundation board that are here, that have made the trip here if you're not from here. Thank you. Thank you for making the contribution, but also thank you for taking a bit of a risk, because this is a new type of school. And I know that you know that well because you've spent a lot of time with Chris listening to what his vision is, and I think it's worth it. I think it might be a little, there might be, you know, we talked about risk and reward, and I think you're going to see reward for your investment. So thank you very much. Chris mentioned a bit about my public life. Most recently, I was leader of the opposition in the House of Commons, and I have to tell you, I'll just mention, a lot of people always ask me, what is it like to be, you know, a leader in the House of Commons? Because it is unusual. I was an MP for many years. It's different being the leader. So, you know, the whole brand is on your shoulders, and you know, you have to sort of carry the team. It's a lot of pressure. But, you know, it's one thing to be the leader in that, from that perspective. But I always say to people, there's that, And then there's actually being the leader in the House of Commons, physically. Because just imagine that you're, whoever you are, trying to make your point, to your boss or your CEO or to whoever, your supervisor, your academic supervisor. You're trying to get your point across. So you stand up and, you're in a room the size of a gymnasium. And there's 307 people sitting around you. And above you, there's hundreds of more people. And there is a TV camera pointed right at you with live national TV coverage. And when you get up to make your point, literally, everything happens to you short of someone throwing a shoe at you. And you're supposed to be, gathered and focused. And of course, when you're a woman, you have to be graceful on top of all of it. So it's quite an experience. I always say when I speak publicly now to please feel free to heckle me. I feel much more comfortable if you heckle me while I'm speaking. So of course the question always follows, why would you leave? Why would you leave such a place? It was really an incredible privilege to be where I was for 13 years, whether it was sitting in cabinet, around the table, as a member of parliament, representing the people that elected me, or as the leader of a national political party. But which brings me to why I'm here today. Because after 13 years of public life, I have to say that I didn't start off that way, but I became quite good at politics. But what I was always passionate about, and even before I went into politics, was public policy. So I feel like I'm going a bit full circle. But in that 13 years, I really had what I would say is a front row seat, both, as I said, in government, but also as an active member of a political party, developing and implementing and communicating public policy throughout those years. And I think I've learned a bit about what is lacking, what kind of support is needed, what works best, what maybe doesn't work so well, what resonates with the public, what alienates the public even further, because that's something we really need to think about right now, and why the policy process, the development process itself is so crucial in achieving a desired outcome. Also, who needs to be included? Who actually has to be included in the process and why? And as we say in politics, and Chris mentioned this, everything is decided by communications. You learn that very quickly when you're part of the government or part of any political party. You can design the best laid policy plan and it goes nowhere because you communicated it badly. So I really look forward to being able to contribute my small bit of experience in that I've gathered in developing, implementing, communicating public policy. I've seen failures, I've seen successes, but I think that will help us build a policy school that has a bit of a different kind of vision, and in particular, as Chris mentioned, has a more outward-facing public engagement goal, and that is different. And why do we need a school like this? Because frankly, there's a huge disconnect between the public and our institutions. And our policy process operates right now, really, I would suggest to you, in silos. It really does. We have the business community, academia, government, civil society, and to a certain extent, each of them has a bit of a distrust for one another. And then you layer on top of the public has a distrust for all of those things right now, a great deal of the public. And then on top of that, you throw in globalization, the fast pace of technology, the democratization of information through social media, the increased polarization in political debate, and it's clear that we really need to change the way we engage as a policy school, or frankly, we will be irrelevant. It won't matter. We can write articles, we can deliver speeches, and the people that need to hear them are not going to hear them. Or they're not going to hear them in a way that makes a difference in that policy development. And if you aren't engaging the public in some way, because at the end of the day, it's those politicians, it's those people that are working on this that are going to ultimately have to see this work through. They're not going to listen if you're not engaging the public. And how we will engage also is will determine whether or not we can reestablish trust in the public. And that's something right now that I think should be front and center for any new institution. It can't be business as usual, I would suggest to you. How we engage with government also matters. We have to take into account, you don't just knock on the door, walk in, help develop a policy, walk out. We can't do that anymore. We have to take into account the practical operations of government, the machinery of government, how the conversations happen around the cabinet table, how the bureaucracy interacts with the political players, where the pressure points are in different political environments, and frankly, and one that a lot of people never think of, why and how things actually become blocked from ever seeing the light of day. And many times this is a political issue. We have to recognize these factors. They must be taken into consideration when developing policy. And once again, if not, we'll never get through to the people who actually need to listen. The role of partisan politics. Partisan politics is something that a lot of people don't want to discuss at policy schools, but it is central to policy development because governments don't get reelected, political parties get reelected. So you must be engaging political parties. And in fact, engaging opposition parties who are outside of government is key because it's usually actually after a defeat that political parties begin to renew, to re-engage, and to rebuild. And a big part of that is policymaking. And that is actually when political parties are most able to be flexible and open to new ideas. We also want, and Chris talked about this, the school wants to teach and communicate differently. Communicating and teaching elected officials and business leaders about policy is key. And, you know, I hate to say this, but it has to be done in a way that they can understand. We always joked in government that you have to communicate at a grade 4 level so that everyone understands, you know, within our group. I don't know what that says about politicians, but it has to be understandable. It has to be translatable to their world. Otherwise, they won't engage. And last but not least, we have to change the way that we engage with the public when we talk about public policy. That means listening. It means respecting different viewpoints and engaging with people in a way, not just in a way that they understand, but where they are. 85% of Canadians now get their news on Facebook. Oh, there's a thought. I mean, that's not a place we usually go, but we have to think about engaging people in a social media platform. Millennials now don't trust institutions. Millennials trust their friends, their family, and people they admire. So how do we get through to them? You know, whether it's videos, Chris is talking about engaging differently, communicating differently. So that's why I'm excited about what I think is going to be a different vision and what Chris is attempting to do here, which is pushing the envelope a bit and engaging and communicating in new ways. And we're starting from scratch, and that's a huge opportunity with the understanding that truly the entire social, cultural, and political landscape has changed, and so we have to change the way we engage on public policy. And social media has completely changed the way governments and political parties operate. It's changed the perception of how fast leaders and policy thinkers actually should respond to the public. I mean, imagine that you are a regular person and you tweet at the most powerful man in the world, the President of the United States, and he actually tweets back at you, and you get a response. This dynamic has completely changed the way the public interact with their elected officials, and that is incredibly powerful, and you have to recognize that it's had an impact on policy development. And what are the policy challenges? They are sometimes they feel overwhelming, but we have to tackle them. They're vast. Around the world, people are rejecting globalization, and with it, they're rejecting trade. Who would have ever thought that we had to make the case for the benefits of free trade? Who would have ever thought? Well, we're doing that now. You know, Brian is here, Brian Topp, and we sit on the NAFTA Advisory Council. A lot of people are thinking very hard about how do we make the case for the benefits of free trade, the benefits of NAFTA. Who would have thought we'd be in that situation? And at the same time, as we're struggling to explain the benefits of free trade, we find ourselves with a complete realignment of the political spectrum. The other day, there was a tweet sent out with a photo of Wilbur Ross, who is the Commerce Secretary. I'm sure you know who he is one of the people helping out with NAFTA, and Jerry Diaz, the head of Unifor. I would say they're probably not first glance going to fall on the same part of the political spectrum. That's an understatement. But there they were, shaking hands in a photo, and they tweeted out, "Great to work together for the betterment of jobs." So it's a complete realignment, and we have to think about that when we think about policy development. Energy and environment. Chris has a huge amount of policy depth and experience in this area. But I would suggest, as somebody who's watched this for a while, this grand bargain of carbon regulations, carbon taxes in exchange for energy infrastructure has not necessarily worked. What went wrong? What do we need to do differently? We now see provinces trying to block commodities, the free flow of commodities across provincial borders. How are we going to address this issue of climate change in a country that has such vast natural resources? And how are we going to address the issue of rising Western alienation? Because I can tell you, it's a reality. And what will be the future of work? I think this is one that is extremely important for us to think about. What will be the policy response to the hundreds of thousands of jobs that will disappear due to automation? How will we deal with the disruption caused by automation? Will we institute a universal income? And what will that do to the human condition? I would argue that it potentially could create unrest, but the issue of a guaranteed annual income is something that we should be talking about with government. I can tell you they're thinking about it around the fringes, but this is an issue that is going to come at us very quickly. And we need to think about retraining and skills. Policy schools should be doing this kind of work now and having these kind of dialogues with elected officials, with union leaders, with business leaders, with political leaders, with civil society, and with the public, most importantly. Finally, I would just end by saying, how are we going to make, because this is an institution, our public institutions more robust and credible? When we look around the world, we see what people would suggest is the failure of small L liberal democratic institutions to a certain extent. And it's creating certain decisions around, whether it was the collapse of the big banks and the mortgage crisis in the United States and the decision to bail out big banks, what that did, the impact that had as a policy on the public in the United States, for instance. Some of the policies that the EU, some people would, in the United States, at least pro-Brexit people would suggest were an overreach. Maybe those things could have been avoided. So at the end of the day, how can we become a trusted voice in an era where the public continues to mistrust institutions? How can we be a trusted source of information? So I'll just end by saying I'm actually very optimistic. I think we've got the right group of people to tackle some of these really tough issues. I think that there is an opportunity if we tackle this in a way that is inclusive and respectful and brings together the right diversity of voices, that we can actually do some good here. And I really look forward to doing things a little bit differently here at the Mac School of Public Policy, and I know we have a lot of work to do, Chris. And on a personal note, I have to say, as a Westerner, I'm really glad to see this connection of communities between East and West, and Calgary and Montreal. I think that's an important thing for our federation. So I know, at the risk of doing things a little bit differently, I think we will see some reward. So thank you, Chris, for including me. Thank you to the Max Bell Foundation, and I look forward to doing some great work with all of you. Thanks so much. And should I invite Chris to come up and join me? Chris, I have questions for Chris.
I was going to cede my time to just questions from the audience. I'm happy to do that, or we can talk.
Sure.
So we don't have much time before you disappear.
Okay.
Do you carry a watch?
I do.
Does it work?
It's hard not to have an assistant anymore. Or an entourage, as we used to joke about it.
So how about if we just go for questions to the audience?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
Questions from the audience, especially for Rona, because she can give you better answers? Robert Greenhill.
Congratulations on the school, Christopher Rona, you're being involved. I was intrigued by the point you made of rising Western alienation. Of course, people in Quebec may be focused on other issues rather than on what's happening in the West. That's something to think about from 20 years ago. Could you maybe just underline a little bit more what you mean by that and why that might be an important policy issue for us?
Well, I think there's been a lot of effort put into the issue of climate change and energy infrastructure, and I'm being very simplistic when I say this grand bargain of carbon taxes or carbon regulations in exchange for energy infrastructure. And for many different reasons, we have a population now in Alberta who is feeling like perhaps their goals aren't part of the Federation's overall goals. And I think that's really dangerous. It's dangerous when we saw the reaction of the former mayor of Montreal around the cancellation of a project that frankly really represented hope for a lot of people in Alberta. That's very simplistic as well, but it's the reality of how people were feeling on the ground. And we have a province on the other side of Alberta now in British Columbia who is actively against another energy infrastructure project. So I think what I would say to you is that over the course of a short time frame, this has become a very political issue on the ground. And there's a sense that there's an environment in which you can see it'd be very easy to stir up the feeling of alienation because it's right there on the surface. And I don't think that's good for the Federation. I think we need to, as provincial leaders, as federal leaders, as policy leaders, need to be aware of the importance of the relationship between our provinces, but as federalists in particular, we have to think about the things we say and how we say them. And so I would just say it's very real.
Can I just add one thing to this? Not so much on the alienation issue, but the issue of resource development and environmental protection is one, and Brian used to be sitting right there. There he is. So this is a plug for what Brian might choose to talk about in one of the panels this afternoon. But I think there is a big disconnect in the minds of many members of the public about how can it possibly be consistent for a country to put a price on carbon emissions and at the same time be a producer of fossil fuels. Like, how do those things possibly add up? I think actually there is a deep logic to that, but I don't think that logic has been explained very well. And that feeds into this sort of issue.
And that's really about policy communication
Absolutely.
in a number of different ways, implementation. So, it just speaks to making sure that all of those things are aligned.
While we're waiting for the next question, Rona and I had agreed to ask each other a couple of questions, a little quiz, 3 questions each. So we're just waiting for another show of hands. But while we're waiting for somebody to put up their hand, I'm going to ask Rona for her favorite example of a successful policy in Canada, or the world for that matter, and why you think it's successful.
Well, we talked about, I mentioned 2 things, was the child benefit and the working income tax benefit. And together, those were things that started under the previous government but were enhanced and targeted under the current government. And they have done remarkable things to lift families out of poverty, help with the child care challenge for working women. And I think those are very good examples of successfully developed, implemented, and communicated, and accepted because of that. Widely accepted, widely used. I mean, that's the other question. You can do all those things, and when there's no uptake of a program is when you ask yourself, what's gone wrong in this program, where the evaluation is really important. Why aren't people using it? So in this case, widely used, widely accepted, widely, I think, It was needed, and I don't think any future government could ever reverse it. That's another example. That's another, I think, measure of a good public policy also. Hard to reverse.
I'm still waiting for other hands, but you want to give us an example of a policy failure? Your favorite policy failure?
Like one that
How
I'm
it
responsible
failed?
for?
One that, well, if you'd like to tell us one of yours, that's fine. Do you have any?
I'm sure I probably do. There's so many. Look, it's a politician's nightmare. But I think, I'll use one from our government so that, I think that's fair. Changes to the EI system. We made a policy change to the employment insurance system. Very controversial, very difficult to make. Was the right thing to do economically, right thing to do for the Federation, right thing to do for the working people, right thing to do for labor mobility, for all kinds of policy reasons. And tried to communicate it well, but just did not, we did not absorb the cultural context, the social context, the historical context, but more than anything, the political context. And it was a disaster for us. And we lost probably we lost every state in Atlantic Canada. But I remember that conversation when we had it and we made the decision to do it. And we knew that it was the right reason. And everybody looked at each other and said, there goes all our seats in Atlantic Canada. We knew it. We could feel it. And yet we still did it because we thought the right thing, always prevails. Well, guess what? Politically, it doesn't always.
So in yes, Prime Minister, that would have been political courage?
That was, yes, yeah.
Okay. Policy hero. Do you have a policy hero?
Well, don't tell him. I told you this, Tom Jenkins, who's a good friend. But he's, he is a business person, so you probably, like you talk about Michael Sabia, chair of Open Text, but has given so much to the policy world, no matter what stripe the government is, provincial, federal, always wanting to help, always wanting to find solutions. And just no one tell him I said that he's my policy, because he's a good friend. But really, I really want to thank everyone in this room, because you all contribute in different ways, but there's a lot of very successful business people in this country, and I can tell you that only a handful of them do the kinds of things that people like Tom Jenkins, Michael Sabia, and others that I know do, and take so much of their valuable time to contribute to the policy development process and work closely with government, no matter who that government is, and we need to do a lot more of that.
Yes. Is there a question there? And that will be, I think, the last question before we break up.
Thank you, that's fascinating. Are you going to be looking at tools for coming up with policy? I'm interested in particular the use of big data policy.
The short answer is yes. If you ask me any detailed follow-up, the answer will be, haven't figured it out yet.
It's only his first hour on the job.
But we're going to put our best people on it. Absolutely.
Who's the politician now?
Okay. I think we have. Thank you very much, Rona.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today. Thank you. I want to thank Rona and Dom Barton and Michael Sabia for saying yes to what was basically a blank check. It was pretty great. It was they saw nothing in writing about what their responsibilities were, what their duties are. They didn't know that they had signed up for 20 years. It's just so thank you. And I look forward to getting you.
What was that about a check?
I look forward to getting you and Dom and Michael Sabia together in a room so we can talk about all kinds of things, including the other 12 people we will have on the advisory board.
I look forward to it. And thank you to all of you for supporting Chris's vision. I think, as I said, it's a bit risky, but I think there's going to be great rewards.
Risk.
Merci beaucoup.
Risk is good.
Merci. Et merci à Chris, merci à Madame Ambrose et merci surtout des mots que vous avez dit, Madame Ambrose, sur le rapprochement des communautés, le rapprochement de l'Est et de l'Ouest et l'idée qu'ici à Montréal, à l'Université McGill, Ça fait vraiment partie de nos ambitions avec cette école. Merci beaucoup. Merci. J'aimerais maintenant vous dire que l'après-midi ne vient que commencer, dans le sens que nous aurions 2 panels cet après-midi qui vont commencer dans le salon printemps. The afternoon is just beginning. We have 2 panels which will now begin in the salon printemps down the hall of the hotel. But before I let you go, in a sense, I wanted to, again, take another opportunity to thank Carolyn Hirsch and everyone from the Max Bell Foundation for joining us, for supporting McGill, for the McConnell Foundation, for our anonymous donors, and the donors who we know will now be also sharing the vision of the school, for all of the people in this room for helping to collaborate in our initiative. You can tell the passion and commitment that we all have here at McGill, that we all have in the Max Bell Foundation, and Rona Ambrose and the other co-chairs as well. The ambition as well for this school is there. Et j'aimerais aussi vous dire que nous sommes très heureux de vous accueillir pour le reste de l'après-midi. Mais avant ça, I'd like to invite Madame Principal Fortier to come up and present a gift to the Max Bell Foundation. So if Carolyn and all of our friends from the foundation would like to join me, along with Chris Ragan, Chris Manfredi, Madame Ambrose, and our Vice Principal of Advancement, Mark Weinstein, we'd like to offer a token of our appreciation. As you can tell, it's a framed picture of the logo for the Max Bell School of Public Policy. So in my first, prise de bec with Chris Ragan, he chose the logo. So, and it's a visual representation of what will become a very, very proud symbol for McGill. And let me ask Chris and Rona to also join the photo.